Welcome to our In Focus discussion tonight, Middle East conflict, the Palestinian experience. The war that broke out last month between Palestinians in Gaza and Israeli forces brought the age-old conflict back to the forefront of the world news. We know this is an incredibly difficult topic, and our goal here tonight is not to go into the entire history because, frankly, we can't do that in the length of our show. We are also not trying to debate who is right or wrong, nor try to claim that we have the solution. But our 7 p.m. team would like to provide a space for local Israelis and Palestinians to talk about their perspectives, experiences, and impact that they're seeing in their communities. Last night, we heard first from Utah's Israeli community members, and tonight we will hear from Utah's Palestinian community members. During our conversation tonight is Nora Abudan. She is a community activist, and Lena Gabayan, who is a medical student. Nora and Lena, thank you both so much for being here tonight.
Thank you so much, Rosie, for having us.
Thank you.
And Lena, we'd like to start with your personal stories. Let's start with you. What was it like growing up in Gaza, and what were the circumstances that led your family to come to the U.S.?
When I first think about my childhood growing up in Gaza, I think about the beauty of the sea, the beauty of the culture, the people, and everything that life had to offer there. I think coming here to the United States is what really made me realize how much we normalized terror, how much we normalized death and destruction around us, especially during the attacks where we're just surrounded for several days up to weeks, depending on the situation, by the question of will we die or when will we die? And then you realize how much the borders control our life in Gaza and controlled my childhood. And even like with the sea being the only escape for a lot of Gazans, you could still see the warships at the end of it. So coming here is really what made me realize how restricted it is in a sense, and how everything is just not available for a lot of our life there. At the beginning, we came here for my dad's studies, but then we returned back. And what led us to ultimately come here is seeking refuge from a war and seeking a better life and education. And it is that made me want to also pursue medical school.
Thank you for sharing that. Nora, let's turn to you now. What is your story and your family story?
Rosie, thank you for the question. It's actually quite a tragedy. My father grew up in Palestine, and when he was only 8 years old, they had to leave because the Israeli forces and the occupation forced his family out of the only home they knew for generations. So him and his younger siblings all had to just carry what was on their backs and flee for freedom and to escape the enduring death. And so they went over to Kuwait, and they couldn't get any citizenship there or any refuge. They went to Jordan, and ultimately my dad applied for a student visa here in the United States, and that's how we came here, is because he was seeking a life of freedom and unfortunately had to leave his motherland.
Thank you both for sharing your stories. Lena, for thousands of years, Muslims have lived in the land now known as Palestine. Talk about the connections and memories that you had there.
Not just for me, for my parents, for my grandparents, and anyone who has or lived or has a connection to Palestine, the memories that you have there go beyond thousands of years. Like, everyone remembers Gaza when it flourished, the culture, the education, the cinema, the art, everything that used to be there, and we all shared it together. My grandparents have memories sharing it with Christians and Jews in complete harmony. It wasn't just emptiness that was there, it was a beautiful place that was that belonged to all of us without what people envision it now.
Nora, Jerusalem has significant meaning to Islam, with followers building pilgrimage and communities there over several centuries. Could you explain how the location is viewed as a religious touchstone?
Yes, Al-Aqsa Mosque and even Dome of the Rock is there. It's the third holiest site for Muslims. And let's not even talk about the atrocities of the Israeli government going in while people, Muslims, were praying unarmed, literally in prostration, being attacked in their own mosque for simply praying. Not only that, but it is a holy site, Jerusalem, for Jews and Christians. This is the place where Jesus was born. These are sacred sites that Jews, Christians, and Muslims all revere, And the fact that the Israeli government and the occupation are obliterating them off the face of the earth just shows this is not about religion. This is about power. And it's truly, truly saddening and heartbreaking that we see all of these historical, religious, and spiritual sites being wiped off the face of the earth.
All right, Nora and Lena, hold that thought. We have to take a quick commercial break, but when we return, we'll resume our In Focus discussion on Middle East conflict, the Palestinian experience. Thanks for staying with us for our second In Focus discussion tonight on Middle East conflict, the Palestinian experience. Before the break, we were joined by community activist Nora Abudan and medical student Lena Gabayan. We pick up now right where we left off. We'll start with you this time, Nora. Now, the issue in modern times starts with the land being colonialized by the British Empire and then promising the land to the remnants of the Ottoman Empire, Jews, Christians, Muslims, who were Palestinians already living there. Can you talk about the War of 1948 and what happened to Palestinian Arabs who lived there?
Well, we call it al-Nakba, which means the great catastrophe, because that's exactly what it was. Palestinians, like you said, Christians, Muslims, Jews that were already living in harmony in the region were attacked, and their homes and their land was stolen. And during this time, 700,000 Palestinians were expelled from their homes, having their keys, never knowing when they are to return. To this day, they cannot go back home. It is devastating. It's something that should have never happened, but unfortunately, because of colonialism, this is the reality of what we're going through right now, and hopefully bringing attention and light to the issues happening since 1948.
Lena, talk about the state of Gaza and the West Bank when there is no armed conflict. How do you see the blockages, the walls and fences, the restrictions of supplies and people moving?
Gaza is a tiny strip of land. It is only 25 miles long and only 5 miles wide, and you have 2 million people stuck inside there. The occupation controls everything and anything, whether in or out. That is the food, the electricity, the water, the medical structure or medicine. Everything is controlled, and everything is calculated, even to the point that the calories that some people are taking is calculated and controlled. And in the West Bank, you got the checkpoints and the settler and the military just walking around that if you do one wrong look or one wrong move, you could be killed. And I just remember living in Gaza, we couldn't even dream of traveling or leaving Gaza. As a Gazan, I haven't been to the West Bank, and people from the West Bank can't go into Gaza, and that is the reality of the occupation that we live in right now.
Now stay with me, Lena. There have been conflicts, big and small, between Israel and Palestine. Which ones do you feel aren't being addressed?
First of all, it's not a conflict. It is a genocide, and it is ethnically cleansing of the Palestinians, and nothing of it is being addressed on the Palestinian side. And we have to remember that this occupation is just trying to erase what Palestine is, the Palestinian identity, and what the country of Palestine is. And when we refer to it as a conflict, then we are just using a distraction of a word. Conflicts have resolutions. The death that comes to the Palestinians and whole families that have been wiped out, there is no resolution to that.
Alina, Hamas was founded after the first Intifada in 1987 with the goal of creating an Islamic state in Palestine. What would you like to say about this?
First, Hamas exists because of what the occupation is and because of Israel occupying Palestine. And what a lot of people don't know is Israel funded Hamas to create a division between the Palestinians. And anywhere in the world, if there is an occupation, the people that are being occupied have a right to resist and have a right to fight that occupation. And when we talk about Hamas and using the argument of Hamas, that is another distraction. We have to remember the basis of the terror and the basis of the occupation, which is Israel.
Nora, supporters of Israel say the goal of Hamas is the destruction of Israel. What are your thoughts about this ideal, and do you believe that Israel wants the total destruction of Palestine?
exactly what Lena said, to echo that, when people are being occupied, when your home is stolen, when your land is stolen, you have every right to fight back. And Hamas is not even the military organized power there. We don't have a military, we don't have a navy. And with all the statistics that even come out of what Hamas did to damage Israel, what they have done in 20 years, Israel has matched that in 1 day. It is not equal. The power is not equal. And it really is a distracting argument. It's a straw man argument, and Palestinians have every right to defend themselves. And if they want Hamas to go away, then have the occupation go away.
Lena, there is a military power balance that favors Israel. How do you view that power imbalance in terms of how that affects the mindset of Palestinians living in the occupied territories?
Palestinians have known their whole life that they are by themselves. They fight for themselves and they fight by themselves alone. But they keep the morale around them. They have strength, they have resistance, and that is a big part of the Palestinian identity. We know that the world left us a long time ago, and there's a lot of feelings about that. But we also know that we have each other and we can keep our story and identity living.
All right, Nora and Lena, hold that thought. We have to take another quick commercial break. But when we return, we'll resume our In Focus discussion on Middle East conflict, the Palestinian experience. Welcome to our third and final In Focus discussion tonight on Middle East conflict, the Palestinian experience. We continue our conversation now with community activist Nora Abudan and medical student Lena Gabayan. And Nora, we'll start with you. Last month's outburst of military violence was the result of a series of events, as seems to always be the case. How do we stop the chain reaction from happening?
So the chain reaction, or the series of events that we're referring to, is the Nakba, or the tragedy of 1948. It's when Britain decided that land that did not belong to them should be given to a third party, which was the Zionists, which is a political movement, and what they wanted to do was erase Palestinians and create their own state with violence and without having harmony with the Palestinian people, which were the Jews, Christians, and Muslims already there. So the chain reaction will end if U.S. pulls out all aid, which is $3.8+ billion coming out of our taxpayer pockets, and ensuring that we're not funding a genocide, because what they're doing is every so often they will escalate and they will go into Palestinian neighborhoods or cities that even by their government, by the Israeli government standard, is illegal to take people out of their homes and illegal to create settlements there, but no one is holding them accountable. And if anything, we are enabling them with our tax dollars, and this has to end, and we will stop seeing the violence, because Palestinians cannot take this any longer. They are being erased by the second.
Lena, the Palestinian Authority is due for elections. When will they happen, and what do you hope will come from them?
So for now, they have been postponed until, I guess, indefinitely. But we have to remember that even if whoever wins that election is who we pick or someone great, it doesn't matter, because who controls that at the end of the day is the occupation. Whoever is in charge is still under the hands of the occupation, and we will have to get rid of the occupation first before anything good happens to the Palestinians.
Nora, let's hear from you. Do you have anything to add? What do you hope comes from these elections that are due?
Just to echo what Lena had said, they are postponed indefinitely. So even if someone were to come to power, there's such an imbalance and a change in power dynamics that the Palestinians wouldn't even have a chance, even if they had exactly who they wanted in power, because they are being oppressed.
Lena, what do you think of the new government in Israel? Does it make you hopeful at all?
It is disappointing, and I don't really see any hope with the current government right now, especially if he has been quoted to say that I am blanking on the quote.
No, you're fine. So he has been quoted saying that he has killed Arabs and it's not a problem at all. He says that Arabs were climbing in trees while they were creating a state for themselves. So really racist, ethnic cleansing and genocidal terms, and it's unacceptable what he says, and he's just replacing someone that is a part of a bigger system.
Thank you, Nora, for helping us out. Sometimes it's difficult, right, to remember a quote. Lena, now that we have the quote, do you want to pick up where you left off there?
I think Nora summarized it pretty well. I think it just will not change as long as whoever is in power, their goal is to get rid of the Palestinians and just create a state without the Palestinians.
Now, Nora, peace means negotiating with your enemy. Is there a will from the Palestinian Authority to negotiate?
I actually reject that notion and challenge it, because I don't believe peace means negotiating with the enemy, especially when the enemy has supreme power over you, when they have F-16s, when they have nuclear weapons, when they have martial law, when you see a Palestinian who is 5 years old up against someone who is in complete arms and fully weaponized. That is no room for negotiation. That's like saying someone can negotiate with their rapist. That's like someone saying they can negotiate with somebody who is robbing them. That's like saying someone can negotiate if they have less power and that there's an equal dynamic, which is not the case. So if we ever want hopes of peace, we need to defund Israel, we need to defund the occupation, and we need to give the land back to the Palestinians, because without that, there will be no peace, and they don't stand a chance with their rocks and their slingshots.
Now, Nora, if Israel makes significant moves to a two-state solution, allowing Palestinians to have their own homeland, what does this mean for the term or concept that we've been hearing about Israel's right to exist?
So I also reject a two-state solution. It's absolutely absurd, and it doesn't make any sense logically. If you rob a bank and you steal $50 million, if you get caught, do you give back half the money? Do you negotiate with who you robbed? Do you say, oh, okay, I've held on to your money for 73 plus years, so I'm entitled to part of it? If someone comes into your home and comes with an F-16 and says, your home is mine now, you don't negotiate when you finally come back and say, hey, you've been living in my home for a long time. Let me give you half of my home. Let me give you half of the rooms here. Let me give you half of what was already mine. Wrong is wrong. If you apply it to anything logically in everyday life, you would never do a, here is half of what you stole of mine. The land belongs to the Palestinians. I'm not saying that people who are in Israel should just fall off the face of the earth, but also it does not justify taking someone else's land for your right to exist. You know, personally, there's homeless people. I think they have every right to have a home. They have every right to autonomy, but that doesn't mean you can come inside my home and steal it from me and say, well, I'm entitled to a home too. There should be other humane ways to go about this.
So, Nora, I know we're not here to try to come up with a solution, but in this case, where do we put the Israelis? Like, what is a possible solution or a way to move forward from this?
I would say give the land back to the Palestinians. And just as we are here, we have refugees and immigrants all living under the United States of America. Have them live under the Palestinian government and give the land back and live in harmony. But have the people who originally owned the land call the shots, and without violence and without occupation and without asserting their authority and thinking that their right to live is more than ours.
Ladies, we have about a minute left. Final words, I'll start with you, Lena. What are your parting thoughts, or what would you like to leave our viewers with?
For whoever's been supporting Palestine, thank you. It means a lot. Keep talking, keep educating, keep listening to Palestinian stories and elevating their voices. This matters, and this does help.
And Nora, let's hear from you. 30 seconds left. Parting words.
I just want to say again, thank you to all of the Jewish, Christian, Muslim, everyone who is about humanity that has stood up in solidarity. Please do your research. $3.8+ billion. They're looking to, Israel is coming to the United States and asking for $1 billion more. We have people hurting here in America. We have people who want health care, who want education. We need jobs here. Instead of putting it towards genocide and funding the massacre of a people, let's keep our money here and let us reinvest it in the American people rather than obliterating another nation.
You've been hearing from community activist Nora Abudan and medical student Lena Gabayan. Nora and Lena, I know this is a personal and emotional topic for both of you. Thank you so much for joining us on the show tonight.
Thank you so much, Rosie.